to move around. If you're kind of here, I'll try to turn to talk to you, but mostly I'm going to be talking in that direction. So there's plenty of room over here if you like to move. Thank you for accommodating today. We've had quite a week. We had most of us here at the temple had a COVID exposure during this week, and other than Genjo, who's up in the fly house there, we've all tested negative, and we had a PCR test and those kinds of things, but we're still not out of the woods in terms of the amount of days that we're supposed to wear masks around other people. And so I didn't want to give a talk with a mask on. And so I asked Kogen if he would give the talk today, which you may have noticed on the digest was supposed to be Kogen. I am not Kogen, but perhaps he is me. He's in Berkeley, and he got trapped. Well, not trapped. He just missed his train, not by his own fault. There was a little snafu with someone who was supposed to give him a ride to the train station. So he emailed me yesterday in the afternoon and said, "Oh, I'm not going to be back in time." So then I thought, "Oh, okay. Well, what do we do?" And I thought, "Oh, well, we could do it outside. It looked like the weather was good." So here we are. My other plan, which was quickly rejected by the people at breakfast, was I was going to bring a stack of poetry books and have us read poetry to each other. They thought maybe that wasn't going to be as good. I don't know. I mean, I didn't bring the books, so you have to you have to put up with me this morning. So I'd like to just make time for question and response this morning. This is such an important part of, I think, any real vital spiritual practice, but particularly within the Zen tradition. The practice of asking questions and then there being some response from a teacher has become really, it's like the lifeblood of our tradition. Almost everything we have from the Zen ancestors comes out of some process of question and response. There is some writings, of course, as well, but that's where this real juice of our tradition is. And so this is kind of an informal question and response, so it doesn't have to be too like a formally Zen, like, you know, what is the sound of one hand clapping or something like that. Just anything that you're interested in, something you're chewing on or something that you wonder about in Buddhist practice or in Buddhism or life, anything is really fair game. And I can deflect questions that I think are maybe not appropriate or important. So leave that up to me if you don't have to filter yourself too much.
Ejo,
Hi.
could you talk a little bit about eye-opening ceremony?
Yeah, so in our particular lineage or tradition, when you have an icon, I'll use the term icon, that's like an image that's on an altar that we venerate. Any image is fine. You know, you can choose any kind of image that you like, but there is a way in which we, what's colloquially called in Japanese, open the eyes of that image. Technically, in this tradition, we don't call it eye opening. We call it dotting the eyes, which is a kind of esoteric reference to what's happening when you do that ritual. One way you can think about it is like everything is sacred, without exception. This is our basic understanding. Really fully, everything is sacred. But we almost never can fully realize that. And so when we take an image and we place it on an altar for veneration, there's a point where the person who's performing the ritual, they dot the eyes. And it's like the pupils are recognized. Normally when we say something is sacred, we still am thinking like, I am seeing something that's sacred. And we forget that whatever is sacred is also seeing us. this pupil is not just a one-way direction. It's not just about me experiencing sacredness, but there is a real alive being there in whatever it is that we're elevating for veneration. So that dot that's placed, there's a brush that the person doing the ritual work will use, and they dot, and then they turn the brush, and then the brush goes back the other direction. It goes this direction, and it goes this direction. It's a kind of like a way of fully recognizing the spiritual power that is present when we encounter something through veneration. And then after we do that kind of ritual with an icon, then that icon is treated as the image it is. So if you have an image of Buddha and you have an eye-opening ceremony, even if you don't have an eye-opening ceremony, I encourage you to do this. You treat it as if it's Buddha. So that means you give an offering of food every day, food and drink. You offer incense, you offer flowers, you offer candles. If you decide not to do that for a while, or you just sort of flake it off, usually people don't decide, they just flake it off, and then you walk by your altar and the flowers are all wilted and there's like moldy food. You go, oh, what has the Buddha been eating? Right? And of course the Buddha's not just there on the altar, the Buddha's here in my being. What has that Buddha been eating? That's the kind of question we can ask. So then there's a spiritual aspect to our life that can emerge from that kind of practice. Hi.
Somebody told me this morning that there's something before thought, and I went, oh yeah, I think that's right, and I was like, oh okay, I've already kind of messed that up.
Yeah.
So my question is, what is that? And because it feels like that's a really important thing, and that's kind of the core of some of the teaching. What are the practical ways that I can tap into that before I think, because so much of my being is about thinking.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if we make before thought a thing, we're always caught. So even the words before thought, now there is a place or a quality which has been externalized, meaning that it's become its own identifiable object of awareness, and then we go about trying to find that thing, right? But we're already lost there, because we're already looking for thought. We're already looking for something that has been externalized as a label, a thought, a thing. So we can hear that teaching, like there is something before thought, and that's true. But it's not a thing. It is sometimes we say it is mind itself, and it is imbues everything, and we can never be apart from it. Yeah. I mean, think how that is. You hear that, and there's no way for it not to move through your being. Right? But mostly, and the reason it's so kind of distracting if you're trying to say something or talk about something else is because we try to divorce ourselves from the immediacy of life for the purpose of being able to abstract our being. And why do we want to abstract our being? Because if we abstract our being, it can take on some permanence, it can shield itself against pain, it can plan things out, it can do all the kind of things that we do to try to keep a control. But actually, there, right? So in the practical sense, what we're investigating in Zazen, one side is the investigation, is like the inquiry, and the other side is like a habituation, which isn't a word we like that much in English, because it seems so like anti-freedom, right? You're going to habituate yourself to something. But you're habituating yourself to relinquishment. That you don't simply follow the track of thoughts that lead to more and more continual abstraction of living, but you receive the immediacy of life. Right? and all of the extra ways that we try to control that, we're relinquishing. And I use the word relinquish rather than just let go, because it sounds more splendid. But we can feel that in our being, the place where we're like taking a hand and we're doing this. And so we're practicing opening the hand. And there's a real life in that. A hand should be able to close and open, but we have a tendency just to close and kind of drag ourselves along. So regular Zazen, we can cultivate this. And that's what I mean by habituation, is we learn to stop just turning everything into something and let it be kind of everything. And you have to do it every day, 2 times. That's my that would be my not requirement, my recommendation. You know, even if it's for a short time, you know, it's better to keep continual, even if it's short, like 5 minutes, 30 seconds. You don't have to limit yourself to that, but if you stop for a few minutes before you go about, you know, you wake up in the morning and all the things that you think it is you're to do, if you stop for a little while and then step into them. At the end of the day, before you carry your regrets into the world of dream and sleep, you stop for a few minutes and let them settle.
Andrew,
Hi.
can you, and in that vein, speak to the relationship between experiencing that immediacy and a sort of surrender, the relation between that and the surrender of knowing?
The surrendering of knowing, or the knowing that is called surrender? Which, I mean, I'm not trying to be all confusing. I'm just trying to get the language right.
I kind of forgot my question exactly. Yeah.
Shop back.
No, I mean the necessity of surrendering your knowing to encounter that immediacy.
Yeah.
More about it?
Sure. I had this great experience when I first moved back from Japan. The first few years I was here, I was sitting sesshin, which is like a meditation intensive with teachers from up north. The Dharma Rain Zen Center is this particular time, and Kyogen Carlson Roshi, one of the founding abbots of Dharma Rain Zen Center, was running the retreat, and he was very kind to me and really took me under his wings. And so I showed up at the retreat just expecting to sit, and he said, "Okay, Eju, go do sanzen," which means I go into a room and then people come in one at a time and they ask you questions. I had never done sanzen before. And I said, "I've never done sanzen before." He's like, "What do you mean you've never done sanzen before? Didn't you ever ask your teacher a question?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, then you've done sanzen before." And I said, "Yeah, but I've never given sanzen before." And he said, "Oh, it's not very hard. Just go in the room, people come ask you questions, and just help them along a little bit. It'll be fine." So I go into this room, and it's this little teeny room at the place where they used to do retreats, and people are coming in, and it was wonderful. It was such a intimate experience that I was very familiar with from practicing with my teacher, but I had never practiced it in a kind of formal way, and I was never the one that was being asked the questions. And so after we had the afternoon service, and in their style, the teachers leave the hall first. So we left the hall first, and we came out, like always, be right here. And he turned to me and he said, "So, Eju, how did sanzen go?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, without a blink, he said, "Stop bragging." And it was so wonderful. I mean, it's a good story, you know. And he was like that, you know. He was able to just like respond in that moment. But I would say that that teaching from Kyogen Carlson Roshi has allowed me for the past 20 years to engage the discipline of sanzen in a way I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Because he made a joke about it, so that loosened me up a little bit. but also because he reminded me that if I know, then there's no way to authentically meet the person who's entering the room. And that goes for really anything. If I think I know, then I'm already lost. I can't respond from the true fountainhead of my own being if I've already given myself over to knowing. And that's true. You know, really, the Sanzen room is like so. Okay, I hope this isn't too long of a story. So this place where you come to meet me in Sanzen, this is referred to as the Hojo, or the Hojo no Ma, which we would usually translate as the abbot's quarters, or the abbot's hut, maybe we would say. This comes from a story in the Vimalakirti Sutra, where Vimalakirti is this, most illustrious teacher of Buddhism. He's a layman. And in the sutra, many people go to visit him, and when they come to his room, it's only 10 feet by 10 feet. That's how big his room is, right? Mine's 8 by 12. 96 square feet. Vimalakirti is 100 square feet, but pretty much the same, right? It's only 10 by 10, but in this sutra, all beings in all universes are present. That's the quality of the sutra. And all these bodhisattvas, they're coming, and there's supposed to be this assembly with all of these beings. And they say, not everyone's going to fit. And Vimalakirti says, what are you talking about? Of course they'll fit. And then they look around, and all beings fit in his room, no problem at all. It's a really beautiful image in the Vimalakirti Sutra. The reason I bring that up is because I told a story about the Sanzen room. I told a story about the Abbot's 10 by 10 room. Actually, Abbot in Japanese means Mr. 10 by 10. That's the literal translation, Mr. 10 by 10, Hojo-san. Yeah. Huh?
What is it?
Mr. 10 by 10.
Mr. 10.
Yeah, the person that's that 10 by 10, that 10 by 10 room. But that's all of our lives. We all have a chamber which is 10 by 10. We all have a chamber which is totally, seems very small. But it's small because it's intimate. It's like this chamber of our own heart. And that's a place where you can meet things without needing to know. And that's what we're attempting to do with all of our inquiry and all of our zazen, all of the various practice that we do, is to learn to encounter in that intimacy of the 10 by 10 room, where really nothing is left out. But as soon as we know, then only one being can fit in, maybe two, maybe a cat. Yeah. Right.
Harmony in the community is resonating, resonance, harmony. I'm a person with a body. I encounter bodies. Sometimes I feel like I have the choice to encounter bodies, and sometimes bodies are just near mine. Yeah. And I resonate, and some bodies are very easy, simple, joyful, pleasurable. The resonance is already there. Yeah. And some bodies, even when I give my offerings, there still feels like disharmony, and I want words on the wisdom to invite harmony.
In the in the Diamond Sutra, this is one of the most celebrated sutras in the Zen school. The Buddha gives instruction to his students in that assembly, and he talks about bodies. He says there's a question which is, how shall we practice? Basically, that's the question that comes to. How shall we walk? How shall we stand? How shall we control our minds? Very, let's get it right sort of question. How do I do this? And the Buddha says, you have to give rise to a thought. And the thought that you have to give rise to take on this path is that you have to consider all beings, no matter what kind of body they have. And then he goes through a long list of bodies, whether they're born from an egg or born from a womb, born from nothing, born from something, born from neither something nor nothing, born from the air, born from there's this long list of all the ways that a body might be born. And then he says that the thought that you must give rise to is that you will save them all, or that you will cross into nirvana with them all. But at the same time, there is not even one being, there's not even one body that will cross over. This becomes the kind of core conundrum of the Prajnaparamita teachings, right? That there are every kind of different being, every different kind of different body, but there's not even one body that is separate from any other body that we could call out as a body. It's all one life, one aliveness. In the next chapter, so that's the third chapter, or section, they're short, a few paragraphs. In the fourth, then he gives a practical advice about how to do this. He says, give a gift. But when we give a gift, which I heard in your question, giving the offering, when we give an offering, we have to endeavor to not be attached to any sense of a body, any sense of a being, any sense of a lifespan, any sense of a confinement of aliveness, any kind of division. And if we do that, then there is a great body of merit that is cultivated, a body that is beyond our normal way of thinking of bodies. So that's the teaching. And so what I want to encourage you in is, first of all, that body of merit, which the sutra says is hard to measure, is really hard to measure. Like when you give a true offering, a lot of the time, stuff will still suck. The person will still be a pain in the butt. You'll still be frustrated. You'll still be afraid, maybe. But that doesn't mean there's nothing happening. In fact, that body of merit that the Buddha is referring to is not one in which our narrow understanding of the problem is always relieved. Sometimes it is, but it's not always relieved. There's something in a more profound level that is shifting. And then my work is to let go of that person as being an other, as holding them in some kind of a body. What I find in that practice is that if I feel the contraction of my own being, that's like my physical being, my psychological being, my spiritual being, my emotional being, that tuning into the places where I contract teaches me a lot about where I'm holding on to that fixed being. And the places where my gift cannot be complete. And that's usually where I'm caught. Again, when I work with that and am able to move beyond that kind of contraction, it doesn't necessarily mean the problem goes away. In fact, many times it becomes more acute because the defense mechanism that the contraction is about, if I'm relinquishing it, then it can become more intense. So I say that because we need to be prepared for that. It doesn't mean that we don't need to take the appropriate protective measures. Boundaries are really important. So this release is not a teaching about let people walk all over you. It's a teaching about finding the true strength or the deeper strength to encounter the being, rather than to live at this kind of edge point of contraction. Anyway, that seemed very theoretical. I hope it was helpful in some way.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hi, I'm really glad that you asked that question. I had a similar one that I would like to just sort of continue on with, having a specific instance where I had a misunderstanding with somebody, and it feels like, and I just want everything to be better, and for us to,
Don't you?
And so I'll keep sort of kind of bringing it up in a way where I just want to be like, what, like move through it or past it, and it just seems to trigger defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And so I feel unskillful when I'm like, oh, I must be doing this wrong. Mm-hmm. And I wonder too if part of it is my desire to be in people's positive regard. Like if I can't handle, if part of it is just that I'm like, oh, you like me? But I was talking to my mom about it, and she's very wise, and she was saying that sometimes it's okay to exist more on the surface in certain relationships. If there's someone you need to see every day, but that doesn't seem to want to, you know, have that resonance, that harmony, or for whatever reason, maybe, you know, I don't know why, if, but as you were talking about a deeper strand, is there some sort of, but you were also talking about boundaries, and so I was wondering if you could talk more specifically about, I guess, yeah, I want to be authentic with, and that's why I think I keep trying to address it, but that doesn't seem to be what she wants. So how can I be skillful and authentic, but have this distance, and allow it to be maybe more surface level in appearance?
Yeah. Well, my first response would be, don't split yourself in two. I think it's very common for us to prefer the deep over the shallow, but the shallow is always a reflection of the deep, and the deep is a reflection of the shallow. And so there's a way in which we think conflict will be resolved by digging down, and then the things that are on the surface aren't, maybe get ignored, and there's a kind of imbalance, and then there's our exterior self and interior self. They have to stay together. And I don't know, you know, in this situation, you have to inquire into it and see, but I wonder if an attentiveness to what feels shallow, what feels like the surface, isn't really appropriate. Oftentimes, if someone's been hurt in some way, they don't want to go to that deep place. They don't know if they can trust you or not in that deep place. And so they need to feel that there's care on the level of just meeting each other. And there are a lot of gifts that can happen there, you know, that we can be willing to not have to talk about the deep part, but to meet in that shallow place. We can express a lot of the depths of our own intention through that level. I had to study this a lot, as I'm married to a person who does not like to talk about all that deep stuff. She will say, if it really mattered to you, you would know. which is beautiful. And it's cultural. She's Japanese, and so there's a big cultural difference in how it is that you come to know each other. And in Japanese culture, the way that the surface talks completely about what's deep is much more like present in their cultural understanding. And we're almost inverted. We think like, well, it's just, the surface is just the surface. Let's get down to the real stuff. I feel so blessed to have met a life partner that has that kind of very strict feeling about that kind of similar thing, you know. So if something's not going right, if there's some injury that's been done, then I have to look on the surface. And I think she's lucky to be married to me because, you know, I make her go into those deep places somewhere. But anyway, I would just encourage you that harmony is a tricky thing. We use the word harmony, and oftentimes harmony is simply our own, like you said, our own clinging for you know, being regarded well by others. That's what we mean by harmony. I want to be regarded well by others. I want everything to just be kind of okay. I so feel that. I hate it when it's not. I really hate it when it's not. But don't take what I'm saying as saying pretend. I don't mean pretend at all. I mean that on the surface, how can you meet somebody in that very, like, what's your body language like? What's your greeting like? What's, you know, what tea have you prepared for them? Either literally or metaphorically.
I don't know if it's going to sound like a foolish question or not. I try to conduct myself without, you know, causing harm to others. But I don't know what to do about having ants in my house.
Oh, yeah.
I feel really bad. No, I'm serious. You know, when I garden, if I accidentally cut a worm in half, I feel terrible.
So, this is what I have found, but most people don't believe me. The ants are fine.
Okay.
They come here every year, and they invade, and my daughters used to go crazy about it. Because there's ants, and they don't, like my oldest daughter, Anzu, she doesn't like the smell of them. She accidentally ate an ant once. If you've ever done that, you gain the superpower, which is not one you want, which is you can smell the ants when they come in. And I accidentally, she would always say that. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I accidentally ate an ant, and then I could smell it. So I get why that might be annoying to some people. But my experience, especially with the sugar ants, is they're almost never a problem. They come in for a while, the season changes. If you do things like, if you keep a compost, put a plate down with some water in it, and then set they can't go across the water very easily. And then if you have a cat, like they're invading your cat food or something, same thing, put a dish of water and then put the dish of cat food on top of it, and it creates a little barrier. So that's a really helpful trick. And then keep things pretty clean, wipe up if you spill anything. And
Of course, it just seems it's endemic. They always just, no matter what I do, they show up.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be like how do I fix ants? That seems like something that could waste my time.
No. Really, but this is what I love about the ants, is that we think that we're in a world where we get to stake our claim.
I don't want to do that.
And the ants are like, okay, great. Here's your claim. And so to me, they're these great teachers of these reminders. Now, sometimes we get to a place where we really need to get rid of something. And then I think it's right to have remorse. But I always hesitate. I always try to go as far as I can in not harming them, if I can. And usually it works out. I mean, like almost always it works out. Yeah, people are harder. Yeah. Hi.
May you speak on dissolving the illusion of separation, and also maybe the words "everything is everything"?
Yeah. So, dissolving the illusion of separation is very important, that we don't start out that inquiry by trying to squish everything together as one. When I think about that, I always have this funny image of when I was a kid. I don't know how many of you had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch when you were a kid, but that was like the standard lunch to take to school. And I got so sick of them, then I decided if I squished them all together in the plastic bag and made like a ball of peanut butter and jelly, that it would be better. It's not. But that's the image that always comes to me when I think about this, like non-separation. An unskillful way to think about non-separation is we take all of the bounty of life and we say, oh, it's not separate, so how can I just squish it together in my mind? And that's, in many spiritual teachings, that's what we end up trying to do. We just say, oh, everything's the same, everything's the same, everything's the same, everything's the same. And that's not really a non-separation. That's more like a monification. I don't know if that's a word, homogenizing. We just make everything the same. But what you said second is really the gateway. Everything is everything, which means each thing is everything, which means that each thing is each thing. That there's no essential distance, which is different than squishing it all together. We inquire into this through the practice of meditation is one way that we do it. So when we're sitting zazen, we don't regard anything, any phenomena, as being in the way, right? Like if I could just get this phenomena out of the way, then I could experience the wholeness of everything. Any phenomena is a total reflection of every other phenomena. And so we just let it be. And that's why the instruction is not to destroy your thoughts or your feelings or your sense of self, but to let it be. Totally let it be. And then the way in which everything mirrors everything, that world can appear. We also study that. So I'm giving a kind of like oral explanation. So in that case, we say like we're exploring it philosophically, or we're exploring it through wisdom, we're exploring it through how is it that we form ideas about the world. And then we can explore it through meditation. But then, this is very challenging, and I say the most liberating, and it comes back to your question, is we explore it through ethics. How shall I live? If each thing is each thing, what are the implications for how I live my life? And that questions for the implications they're very tricky, and they can, sometimes they just freeze us because we're like, I can't do anything. But there's a deep freedom in that inquiry as well. And these are the three classical divisions of the Buddhist teachings. So prajna is wisdom, samadhi is concentration or meditative inquiry, and sila is ethics. So we try to study this in all of those three realms, and that's really the where the path comes from.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Puja?
Hi.
I'm embarking on a training to work with people regarding death and dying. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I wondered if you could share with us the ethics regarding that particular issue. A small
thing, yeah. Well, I mean, do you have a particular ethical facet that you're interested in, or just?
Well, it's a dilemma for me when I think about it. So if acceptance is a stick, okay, is a thing, okay, and inevitability is a thing. This is a very active approach to that thing, that inevitability. Okay, and so I wonder where forbearance, how all that fits in. With
Are you speaking particularly about people actively receiving some medicine to end their life?
Yes, pursuing the death with dignity option for the end of life choices.
It's so tricky.
It's so tricky.
It's so tricky. It's so tricky because there's one line which says, pain and suffering is bad, and if we could get out of it, that's obviously the most ethical thing to do. Is to die with dignity, right? Not to go down this long path of really what can be terror. So it makes sense. And there's another way of thinking about this that says we need to face the pain of life and the pain of death. And if we just turn from it, we're losing something very vital about what it means to be alive, and we might cultivate a society in which we're kind of encouraged to just avoid difficulty by checking out, or encourage other people to check out because them having difficulty is difficult for us. So that also holds a lot of water. Those poles, I think, are important to think through, and to see that both of them have their own weakness. I think is important. That the ethics of it will not be decided in the abstract. It won't be decided in the kind of like a philosophical inquiry into it. That the ethics of it will be decided in the actuality of meeting death. And for me, I've met several people who have received the medicine. I think we talked about this the other day. Who received the medicine, and only one has decided to do it. And what I think is really good about our situation in Oregon is that we've removed it from the philosophical argument to a degree, and brought it down into the actual lived experience of people facing death, so that they can be at that threshold and navigate the ethics of it in place, rather than this kind of abstraction that is on some other ground. Everyone I've met has really worked with it deeply, and my guess is that that's one of the reasons it's so important to have people like you with broad experience and depth of heart that can be there and help a person really do that, to really face it as a deep ethical conundrum rather than just a kind of, would someone please tell me whether it's right or wrong? I think that's the worst, if we just live in this kind of set idea of it being right or wrong. I don't want to open up a whole big can of worms here, but I think it really reminds me of the debates we have about abortion. That there is definitely an ethical question around abortion. I don't think we can say there's not. But where does that happen? Where does the ethics of it happen? And we're so bound in a kind of abstract and legalized framework for that, which is for these most intimate decisions, I don't think is very helpful. This is my thoughts. Yeah. I don't have any time reference.
It's 11:30.
11:30. Oh, perfect. Well, thank you for sitting in the garden today. This was kind of nice. Yeah.
This and all our teachings are offered free of charge. If you would like to make a donation, please visit our website at buddhaeye.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. Thanks. Sangam Saranam Gacchami Dudiyambi Saranam